Global Order. I'm Hindol Sengupta. I'm delighted that the former Foreign Secretary of India, Kanwal Sibal, has joined me in conversation today. Ambassador Sibal needs no introduction to the audience of this program. We've had him multiple times before. Today, I requested time from Ambassador Sibal to talk about what's really going on in America. And we intend to do a three-part series with him. Today, I will be doing the first part, which is really focused on American politics. There's been a big Modi visit. Prime Minister Narendra Modi was just visiting America. He met, of course, President Donald Trump and his team. Trade negotiations happened on the sidelines of that visit. And of course, there's much more happening with American politics. We'll discuss all that with Ambassador Kanwal Sibal. Ambassador, thanks very much for your time.
My pleasure.
I want to begin by asking you what you make of this debate on whether a Trumpian tariffs, so to speak, will impact India's ties with the United States? Or do you feel, as some other people feel, that there are other issues like the Khalistan issue, for instance, and other such issues, USAID, a big issue that has come up, they will determine the way forward? Which argument do you support and why?
Well, firstly, on the Khalistan issue, we will get more cooperation from United States. Even in the joint statement, there is an indirect reference to elements in the United States who are questioning sovereignty and territorial integrity. Now, one can take this as a reference to such groups, although they have not been named. But in any case, I can't see Trump at all sympathizing with these groups in any way. And on terrorism, as you know, generally is very strong. And then we have people like Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, and of course the NSA and the Secretary of State, who would be very receptive to our concerns. As you know, Walsh, the National Security Advisor, was the co-chair of the caucus, India caucus, which means that he has been in intensive contact with the Indian origin community, the Indian diaspora. And when they talk to the Americans, apart from other things, the most prominent thing they want to talk about is terrorism. So there I don't see too much of a difficulty. With regard to USAID, in fact, the Trump administration is pulverizing USAID. The kind of exposures that they have made of USAID's activities is in terms of diplomacy, quite earth-shattering, because it has given a handle not only to India, but all sorts of countries who have been at the receiving end of American interventions to actually say that all their concerns about this kind of interference were extremely valid. And now the US itself is exposing this interference. And then if you kind of list the kind of activities that the USAID has been supporting, it is shocking. It is shocking. One always knew that USAID, apart from some of the things that they do which are legitimate and which give them a good cover, is an instrument that the US CIA, the intelligence agency, use. And when you are on the ground in developing countries providing aid, especially those who need a lot of aid, then you are doing good and you get access to all the departments of that particular country, including at the highest level, politicians at the highest level. And therefore, you can mine information. And then if you are active on the ground, you can direct your activities in a way that suits your political objectives. Now, keeping in mind what happened during the CAA protests, the Shaheen Bagh protests, the Delhi riots, what's happened in Manipur, and all this campaign against what we've been trying to do in terms of change in our immigration laws and everything else. So the kind of protests that have been happening, and the farmers' agitation, one can actually suspect that there was money and advice being given to the concerned uh, lobbies who were behind this. Uh, and even the Khalistani movement. Uh, in some ways, intelligence agencies would like to have a handle on foreign governments which they can use to get extract benefits at other on other issues from the government, or for that matter, keep them on tenterhooks, keep them somewhat destabilized in order to advance your interests. What has happened in Bangladesh? Uh, One can now suspect that the USAID had a big hand in it. The entire media campaign against India. Now we know that the USAID, one of the prime things they've been doing is to finance the global media in all countries. All the big names that we talk about in Western media, one way or the other, they have been financed, supported by USAID, even this Open Society Foundation and Soros and everything else. So the bad press of India, democracy backsliding, uh, and maltreatment of minorities, and all the ratings that various agencies have been doing, uh, I think one can easily suspect that there has been American financing. And now you've seen, which is not directly linked to the US aid, but $21 million for voter turnout in India. I mean, as it is, the voter turnout in India is much larger than in the West. So when they say voter turnout, it obviously means that in particular constituencies where you want to mobilize voters against the ruling party through your local intermediaries, after all, money is given. So this is one way of doing it, and now this has also come out in the open. Therefore, on this, I don't think we're going to have any problem. In fact, the problem is being solved for us. And in my own view, this is the right moment to close down USAID offices in India permanently. Uh, because we can do it and we won't come under pressure, and we've got reason to do so. Now, insofar as tariffs is concerned, that's a big issue. Because Trump, I listened to his an intervention or his interview given in 1988. Somebody sent it to me yesterday, and there's been absolutely no change in his thinking. What he said in 1988, he's saying today. So this is in his mind. And mind you, in his inaugural speech, I think, if I mistake not, he talked about the great era of U.S. Economic prosperity in the 1930s during the president when they imposed very high tariffs. So he's a great one for protecting the American, not protecting, actually weaponizing tariffs in order to extract concessions from others. In the case of Modi's visit, of course, if you look at the joint statement and the conversations they've had, we have now agreed that in the next 7 or 8 months, we'll work out some kind of a multi-sectoral trade deal between India and the US, which would give more access to US products in India and reciprocally to Indian products in the United States. Now, this is the right way to go, because if we just ourselves reduce tariffs, then the MFN business creeps in. And I knew a little bit of what would happen during Trump's first term, and we were trying to negotiate such an agreement. And our argument to them was, you want us to reduce duties on tariffs on some IT products. But we told them that China will be the first gainer from this, not you. They're much more competitive. And therefore, the right way to go is a bilateral deal, which then excludes MFN treatment. So this is the way down which we'll go. But the problem is that he has announced that on April 1, he will announce tariffs. In fact, he's instructed the USTR and the Commerce Secretary to look at individual countries and the tariffs they apply on American products. And it will not be one size fits all. but depending on what tariffs each country imposes, there will be reciprocal tariffs by the United States. So study will be done on India's tariffs, and some decisions will be taken. Keeping in mind that Trump has this absolute bugbear that India is a tariff king, and he keeps repeating that. And even in the joint press conference, he mentioned this. Other thing is that he doesn't know his facts and figures. He's very impressionistic. Um, so he's got something in mind and he blurts out things and he doesn't mind if they are wrong. For example, he said that the deficit in trade between India and United States is $100 billion. It's 45.6 billion dollars. How can he go so wrong? He doubled it. Now, if he has that in mind, then when discussions take place on what to do with regard to imposing high tariffs on India, they'll have to first convince him, for heaven's sake, the figure is not what you have in mind. And if you propose something, it is on the basis of actual figures, not your impression about what the size of the deficit is. But the point is that he was quite, how should I say, uh, he said it pretty aggressively. He didn't bother about mincing his words, and in fact, he made very light of it. That is good for you because it is the easiest way out. Actually, it doesn't matter what tariffs you apply because we'll apply the same to you. So this is a good solution. I mean, this is actually playing with the whole thing. Uh, Two, three reasons. One, of course, there is a terrible, terrible contradiction in what he says. He's imposed 30% or 25% tariff on steel and aluminum. He threatens to impose 30% tariffs on Canada and Mexico in violation of NAFTA. He's announced 10% tariffs on India, on China, and he promises to apply more as well as on the European Union. So he thinks that raising America's tariffs is a good way to ensure America's prosperity and uh, for its economic growth, and hence it is in the interest of American workers. But if India has high tariffs for the same reason that we want to protect our economy and we want to have economic growth and we want to protect our workers and give them hope of more prosperity to come, that's wrong. That's wrong. So you can't have it both ways. That tariff walls are good for America, but they are not good for India. The second is that where is the comparison between the US economy and the Indian economy? Their per capita income is $88,000. Ours is 2,700. Their economy is about 21, $22 trillion. Ours is about $4 trillion. So it's not an equal playing field. So you can't say that I want an equal playing field in tariffs, irrespective of the fact that insofar as the general economic conditions are concerned, there's huge, huge disparity. That is also fundamentally intellectually wrong. Finally, look at the advantage the United States has because of the dollar and as the global reserve currency. Uh, they can weaponize it. They have weaponized it. Uh, and see, United States will never have a problem because they can meet their whatever debt they have is by printing. Of course, if they print more and more dollars, it has other consequences for the economy. But the point is that they will never default because they are protected. And then where do people who earn a lot of dollars, where do they keep their dollars? They keep that a lot of that in U.S. Treasuries. So it's a circular thing that goes on. So if you have then to take the weight of the American economy in the system, how they use it, what advantages they get. Putin said the other day, I forget the figures, how many trillions of dollars have flown to the United States over the years because of the dollar being the reserve currency. So if you look at the total perspective, just singling out relatively high tariffs, and then again and finally, our tariffs are totally in accordance with the WTO. And our actual tariffs are much less than the bound tariffs. So it's not as if we are violating anything. So it should be a much more mature bilateral discussion rather than this arm twisting and public arm twisting of India.
What three things, key things you just said in your answer? Number one, I'll take the Khalistan and other such issues first. A lot of the problems that, at least in the public, that India and the United States have had, especially in recent years, is because of such issues. One, the Canada issue springs to mind, that spilled over to the US. Things were leaked, including, and you and I had a conversation about this, even the Indian NSA's confidential conversation was leaked by the US side. All of these things are interconnected. You mentioned these polls and rankings, including democracy rankings. Some of this had become so apparent, including in one infamous poll which showed that press freedom in Afghanistan was higher than it was in India. This had become so blatant that a lot of people were already calling it out. Now, of course, the Americans themselves have, in a sense, exploded the whole story. I want to ask you, one of the issues here really is that because the system that used to target foreign governments began to target domestic rivals at home, and that's why there is so much angst in people like Donald Trump and Tulsi Gabbard and all these other people, because their own system began to target rivals at home. What went wrong there? Because for many years this was only directed outwards, Ambassador. How did that system turn inwards to create this implosion?
Well, firstly, if you look at Trump's first term, there are some years from today, the system was working against him. And they tried very hard. They manufactured this whole thing about Russiagate in order to prevent him from winning the election. And then whether, as a matter of fact, he had won the election and it was denied to him, etc., that's a different story. And then after that, if you see the kind of manner in which he was hounded, the efforts to impeach him, effort to disqualify him, actually haul him before the court, etc. So the entire system, the judicial department, the CIA, and the FBI, they were all working against him, which is why now it is, he's dealing with all these agencies in the way of. I mean, he's settling scores with these agencies. So one is that this system that exists in the system that existed in the United States had been working internally against Trump even before. So that is nothing new. The other is this system was not questioned because both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party and its leaders were not targeted by the system before Trump came, because Trump was an outlier and his views being what they were, and the manner in which actually he rose to power within the Republican Party by sidelining the Republican leadership, as it were, because he went directly to the people and got the support of the people, especially the right wing, the MAGA types. So in that sense, there was a kind of understanding between the two parties, the leaders of the two parties, that the system was functioning in a way that didn't personally attack them or politically was politically targeted against them. And this contradiction became obvious and became glaring when Trump tried to barge in and sought to become the president with all this, the kind of views that he had, both internal and external. So that is one answer to your question, that there was a sense of comfort with this system before, which was not there. Insofar as targeting the system, targeting the external world, this is an old story. I mean, if you look at the kind of interventions that the CIA has done over the years in Latin America to begin with, but elsewhere in the world, and the manner in which they have manipulated information to give the politicians, uh, ammunition to promote regime changes and everything else. As for example, in the case of Iraq, where they produced this information that Iraq was developing chemical weapons, when in actual fact this was not the case. To what extent these elements were behind the Arab Spring in general and regime change policies there. Much more than that, to what extent these elements were behind what began in Ukraine and in some other area, parts of the erstwhile Soviet Union as color revolutions. Clearly, if Victoria Nuland was the front, then you have to see who she was backed by, what were the forces behind her who were supporting her, because she had to have support within the system and within the entire system, not merely the U.S. State Department. And therefore, in that sense, the intelligence agencies can and do play a very powerful role. So I now today Trump has taken certain actions and intends to take actions to clean up the mess, which will give some breathing space to the outside world.
I have a
But
question, if I may, Ambassador, and I will be blunt about this. In your opinion, do you believe today that the kind of clamor that had started with negative press about India, including the kind of clamor we saw during the farmers' protest and later, democracy rankings, this, that, and the other, this drumbeat, as it were, do you today believe that, in a sense, a sort of soto voce, if not absolutely full blown regime change, was attempted in India?
I don't think it was a regime change because promoting a regime change in a vast country like India is impossible. Because we have very strong regional parties, and in some key states, actually, the parties in power are in deep opposition to the ruling party, to the BJP, and BJP has tried very hard to increase its uh, its role in these states like West Bengal or Tamil Nadu or Kerala. They lost even in Karnataka, and these are very big states where there is a huge amount of economic activity, but not so much in Kerala perhaps, but in Karnataka and Tamil Nadu especially, a huge amount of economic activity going on. Um, so so then, if you have an idea of a regime change in India, then you are confronted with the fact that power in India is dispersed, though it may appear that because BJP at the center holds power, and therefore, if you destabilize the BJP, you can bring about regime change. Uh, look, even if the BJP is destabilized, what happens? The Congress, I mean, that is the only pan-national party. And the Congress doesn't, how many, one or two states they have under their control. So they can't be brought to power because of regime change, because the public has to give them that backing. Thirdly, our democracy, whatever it is, very deeply entrenched. Very deeply entrenched. And there are institutions that back this democracy. And therefore, doing it in a way where you are able to convince the public in large parts of India and the huge length and breadth of the country to think in a certain direction and have a uniform view that we have to get rid of the BJP and Modi. Impossible. Yes, you can create problems. And that's what they've been trying to do. And my impression is that if it is true, that the idea would have been that we cannot do a regime change in India or prevent BJP from coming back to power. But what can be attempted is that they don't come back with an absolute majority. And I can share with you that this is the impression that I've been getting in some of my conversations with people who matter, who are very much aware that this could well be the agenda of these forces, which includes all these ranking agencies and all the international press and media and think tanks and everybody else, because it was very systematic, very uniform, the kind of criticism of Modi, backsliding of democracy and everything else. I have also a feeling that now I don't know whether it's legitimate for me to say so, but it's my impression, is that maybe they were also interested in AAP becoming the focal point of some weakening of the central government in Delhi, and especially because it has resonance, across the country, if that is so. So, yes, to answer your question, I don't think that regime change was there, but certainly hobnobbing with forces in India and promoting them, promoting instability and promoting these forces so that the BJP would have been prevented from winning outright majority in the third term. Yes, very much so.
And in a sense, then, considering the results of the third term of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the BJP government, in a sense, it succeeded, isn't it, Ambassador?
I would have thought so also if you just look at facts and figures as they are. On the other hand, I say to myself that, look, if they had just managed to get the same number of seats in UP as they got last time, they would have been close to 272, plus one or two in Maharashtra, and they would have been home. Yes, not 303, but they would have got 272. And I can't imagine that they could have worked so effectively in UP with the Yogi in power. Now, what went wrong there? There is a lot of analysis. One doesn't need to talk about it. But maybe it was it's a failure of the BJP itself or the RSS itself, rather than any external factor explaining this. Therefore, you're right. One would have thought that the analysis you've given, that the fact that BJP got 240 instead of the expected number they had in mind, that the external forces had worked. But yes, if, as Modi said, we can reach 400, or as the feeling was that they'll cross 303, many felt. Now, from that to even 272, 273 in a scenario which I have outlined, where they had got the votes they wanted in UP and some extra here in Maharashtra. To that extent, it is possible that they were able to work on the ground sufficiently to reduce the numbers that the BJP had in mind in terms of the size of victory.
Other two occasions where people are extremely doubtful, and I'll put this to you, Ambassador. One, of course, what happened during the Shaheen Bagh protests. That's one. Second, this global outrage that came about when this Khalistan issue broke out. And the outrage seemed to absolutely ignore. Many people asked the question, if the outrage was, in a sense, holistic, it would also take into account the attacks on Indian embassies in Canada, in San Francisco, in London, one of which I saw with my own eyes. But none of that was being taken into account. And therefore, there were big question marks there. And the other thing, of course, was what happened in Manipur and the way it spread and the destabilization of India's border. We will come to eastern border. We will come to Bangladesh in just a minute. But I just wanted to focus on these three things. What happened in Shaheen Bagh, Khalistan issue, and of course the farmers' protest, which in fact reached right up to Delhi.
Well, insofar as the Shaheen Bagh thing is concerned, it fits in very much with the narrative in the West about minorities. And this is an issue which can be exploited in India because we have a minority problem. And that minority problem is deeply, deeply ingrained into our political system, in the debate on secularism versus non-secularism, that kind of a thing. So this is ripe for exploitation. Number two, it's also a question of how the sense of confidence the Muslims have in themselves, in terms of the numbers they have, in terms of how they can affect voting patterns in certain constituencies, and the feeling generally Muslims do have that they have international backing. That beyond a certain point, India's hands are tied, or let's say the Indian government's hands are tied, because there would be a furor, international furor, if there was visible maltreatment of Muslims and discrimination against them. Insofar as Shaheen Bagh is concerned, I think they were extremely well tutored. The resources were there to sustain their protest. And the tutoring came from the fact that they were having Indian flags and they were saying that we believe in Indian democracy. So clearly there was a method in this madness, that do not transgress the limits of peaceful protest. And if you don't do that, then the international lobbies which are behind this would have a very good argument against the government on Muslim persecution and right to peaceful protest and everything else. The other is that for these countries, because of the minority problems that themselves have, and the fact that there are forces which are now, and we've seen them now much more in Germany and elsewhere in France, where they are getting more and more upset with the kind of law and order problems that are being created, terrorism problems and this and that, and right-wing sentiments have grown. It's the problem for the liberal lobbies in these countries who have been in power. So that was another reason for them to show the backing for minority rights elsewhere as part of their larger ideology. As part of their larger ideology, in order to affirm that ideology back home also. That we support ideologies where against right-wing forces, the BJP, RSS, Hindutva types are right-wing forces, and therefore there is moral legitimacy in supporting this. Now, insofar as Manipur is concerned, there are a couple of dimensions in this. One, of course, is that there is this Myanmar angle, the drugs angle, the Metis being Hindus and the Kukis being Christians. That angle comes in. Support of Christian lobbies, evangelist lobbies in the West for this group, and the manner in which the opposition has been targeting the government on Manipur and the Prime Minister himself, making a huge issue of it, and the manner in which the previous US ambassador, to my mind, provocatively said that they are willing to help in this law. Why do we need the American ambassador's help or America's help in solving our internal problems? So clearly, if the US ambassador was saying this, there are wheels within wheels, one can suspect. And then what Sheikh Hasina said, that they want to carve out a Christian state in that part of the world. And our own opposition, whether they were being duped or whether, whatever reason, they were focusing on this issue enormously. So there also, clearly there are some foreign elements that have been at play. The third, insofar as the Khalistanis are concerned. Now, thing is that in Britain, we've always had a problem because of the support that the pro-Khalistani lobbies have had in that country under the guise of right to peaceful protest. Uh, there's also the fact, as you well know, and you have studied in the UK, uh, that uh, the minority votes there uh, are critical in so many constituencies, and therefore British MPs need to cultivate these lobbies. Beyond that, there is also the fact that uh, the the Sikhs have always been looked at with a different eye by the British imperialist-oriented establishment because the Sikhs were considered as how should I say as close supporters of the British rule in India after right from 1857 when they were used against the protesters, and also um, the Sikhs had enrolled in large numbers during the First and Second World Wars, and therefore they were part of the support that Britain had in terms of manpower, which they badly needed in these world wars. So there is a lot of latent and active sympathy uh, for uh, for the Sikhs. You see in Delhi itself, when Delhi was built, how much land was given to the Sikhs in Delhi and all the gurdwaras that came up. I'm not making a communal statement at all. I'm from Punjab, therefore nothing of the kind. I'm just analyzing it.
No,
That they were being
absolutely.
rewarded for
Absolutely.
their services to the British Empire. So that sentiment lingers on in the UK. And Canada is different in the sense that two, three things. One, that in about 19 or some constituencies, the Sikhs play a very large role, and there were 700,000 of them there. And they have been very systematic in making sure that in specific constituencies, they have numbers which will affect the voting patterns. On top of that, very systematically, they went into the police and the customs agencies, in order to facilitate the illegal or legal migration from Punjab into Canada. Uh, and thirdly, it's what Prime Minister Trudeau believes in that uh, Canada should not have in a sense, multiculturalism means that Canada must not have any specific national identity. Its
So-called
national
post-national nation, so to speak.
exactly. So, in that sense, he was giving free play to these forces, in addition to all the other political issues, including, of course, the fact that Jagmeet Singh, on whom his minority government depended on survival, is a crypto Khalistani himself. So that would explain why Canada went a bit off the rails on this issue. And the US itself has been lax in this regard. After all, our consulate in Vancouver San Francisco has been attacked twice, but without any steps taken by the US in this regard. Demonstrations are allowed against our embassy in Washington. Uh, uh, and and the discourse is the same: right to peaceful protest. That under our laws, Panoon can say any damn thing that he wants. Threaten our prime minister, threaten our airport, threaten our airlines, threaten our ambassadors. But this is within the ambit of U.S. Freedom of speech. Uh, so
You see
I
some of
think
this.
this is just a feeble argument. Behind that is the fact that they don't want to take stringent action because that will then remove a pressure point on India.
You think some of these things will now be, in a sense, curtailed? I mean, I totally take your point about the so called marginal seats in the UK, for instance, where these specific groups, ethnic groups, become pressure points and pressure groups because they vote in large numbers. We're, of course, seeing the same thing with the rise of the so called Muslim vote pressure group in the UK in the last elections, and the Islamophobia law that's in a sense being debated and will perhaps come in the UK. But do you see, as far as the Khalistan issue is concerned, because a lot of that support depended on American support, do you see that ebb a little bit now with the second term of Donald Trump?
I think so. And we would have very good arguments to make, and we'll have a sympathetic ear. I'm confident that we'll be able to better handle this issue in the United States in cooperation with the US government. Uh, Mind you, there is always this issue of US, what is that called? The freedom of expression, right to peaceful protest, and uh, and the U.S. Constitution and all that. And the Democrats have not died in the system. And the New York Times and Washington Post and Foreign Affairs and all this media, Financial Times, all will continue to exist. So I don't think the problem will go away. The moment Trump commits some mistakes or becomes vulnerable, then we'll find that all these elements will get a fresh breath and we'll try to create some problems. And if there is some problem in India, law and order, minority issues, the Western press will play it up. So I don't think we are off the hook in terms of the press media working against us. But I think at the government level, we would have a easier time. I can't imagine, for example, that when the reports on religious freedom or human rights are presented by the State Department, as is mandated by the Congress, that Marco Rubio, like Secretary Blinken, will single out India by name in his opening remarks, which he did unprecedentedly. No other Secretary of State had earlier mentioned India by name in the opening statement. That kind of a thing will go away, I think.
Talk a little bit about Bangladesh, because that's the other thing connected to the Manipur border that a lot of people are worried about, Ambassador. Many people suspected, including, of course, Sheikh Hasina herself, that there was more to her ouster than just a popular protest. After all, merely, bunches of students cannot organize and maintain a protest for so many weeks, despite, all the, clashes and calamities that occurred. Now, after Sheikh Hasina moved to India, the entire situation has been quite tense until the second Donald Trump regime came to power. And now, in President Trump's own words, I will leave Bangladesh to India. How do you read that statement, and what do you think? Because right after that, Sheikh Hasina has come out and given a statement where she seemed to be far more aggressive than before. How do you read all of these things?
My reading of what Trump said is not quite what is being interpreted uh, uh, by many. He was asked the question of the involvement of the deep state in Bangladesh, and he said that the deep state was not involved, and then he passed on the question to Prime Minister. He didn't want to uh, answer that question beyond the fact of the um, uh, involvement of the deep state. Now, the fact that he left it to the Prime Minister to the answer question has been interpreted as he has left it to the Prime Minister to do what he wants in Bangladesh. I won't go that far. Now, it's a different matter that if we decide to do what we want in Bangladesh, that we'll get a pushback from Trump himself. That may not be the case. But I don't think it's a carte blanche from him that you do what you want. He didn't want to, mind you, though, he could have, and he should have perhaps talked about the persecution of minorities. After all, he did issue a statement about persecution of minorities, including Hindu minorities. So he could have said, but I don't know about the deep state, but there is a question of the restoration of true democracy there, or even if he didn't want to say that, that there is an issue of persecution of minorities, including Hindu minorities, that would have gone down very well with Modi and with India and our Indian public opinion if he had said that, and that would have put enormous pressure on Bangladesh, on Yunus. He didn't say that. But I won't attribute to his lack of willingness to say this. Just may have, just maybe he said, let Prime Minister answer that question. And with regard to, assuming for a moment, he said that I leave it to India to deal with Bangladesh. But I don't see in the in what we have been doing with Bangladesh that we are willing to put that kind of pressure on Bangladesh and deal with Bangladesh forcefully. Forcefully. After all, we just invited the Bangladesh Foreign Minister to the Indian Ocean Conference in Oman, organized by the India Foundation with very close links to the RSS. And our Foreign Minister met the Bangladeshi Foreign Minister there. Earlier, we sent our Foreign Secretary to Bangladesh. We have also allowed rice and other foodstuffs to go unimpeded to Bangladesh. We have made statements about persecution of minorities and this and that, but we've not gone beyond that. We've not dealt with illegal Bangladeshi migrants in this country. I just saw the Supreme Court saying that while you need the permission of Bangladesh government to send back these refugees to Bangladesh, though they don't understand that this can't be done unilaterally, that the government has to accept the illegal migrants. So the point is that we ourselves are pursuing, rightly or wrongly, a soft, relatively accommodative policy towards Bangladesh, perhaps modeled on our policy towards Maldives, that sooner or later these people will come to their senses and realize that they need India, and there will be a change in their policy after the initial flush of the revolution, so-called, is over. But coming back to that, it is very clear, as Yunus himself said at the Clinton Foundation while he was introducing that fellow, his principal advisor, who's an Islamist, that all this was meticulously planned. And he was praising him for that. So therefore, it had nothing to do with what is being projected as a reason for Sheikh Hasina's ouster. Maybe she was not sufficiently democratic or whatever else. Those arguments may be there. But it was a very calculated coup. It's clear.
I have two last questions, Ambassador. One, of course, is a question that really talks about where the India-US relationship goes from here. Because as far as American law is concerned, this is President Trump's last term. He's allowed 2 terms. He would have finished 2 terms at the end of this term. And as you said, the democratic elements and many other kinds of elements, including the press and so, are very much active. Do you see, in a sense, in the remaining years of the Modi-Trump era, so to speak, coming up, do you see any substantive move forward, for instance, in nuclear energy cooperation, something that a lot of people are beginning to talk about, and also in weapons sales? How seriously do you take this F-35 offer? Because a lot of people argue that the F-35, being one of the most complicated systems in the world, I mean, buying that off the shelf is really, while it has been offered, is really not legitimately on the card for India, because India needs to, really build capacity elsewhere.
Well, insofar as the defense ties are concerned, there will be pressure on us because if you remember, after the telephonic call between Modi and Trump, the readout of the White House spoke about Trump wanting India to buy more security equipment from the United States, as well as what is the other thing he mentioned? One was the security equipment and the tariffs issue. Now, and more market access to India. The market access we discussed. Insofar as the uh, defense ties are concerned, uh, already in the joint statement, we mentioned that we are going to buy an additional six PI-8 uh, maritime security aircraft, which are very good, and possibly we need them for securing the oceans and keeping a tab on the movement of Chinese submarines in the Indian Ocean. Uh, and so we've also talked about India acquiring the Striker
Right.
combat vehicle as well as the Javelin
Yes.
guided missile, anti-tank guided missile.
The Javelin could actually perhaps be co-produced by two countries, is from what I read.
Yes, yes, this is what they are saying, that we are asking for co-production. Uh, but as usual, we'll buy some in mint condition, in ready-made condition, and others we'll co-produce. Let's see how it goes. Now, insofar as F-35 is concerned, there's nothing new. When I had gone to Washington about how many years ago? It's 25 now, well before COVID, let's say 17, 16, 17, about 8, 9, 10 years ago. Uh, I was sitting next to the assistant secretary for in the Pentagon, and she talked to me about F-35. So I, on my own steam, not that I'm in government, I said there's no way India is going to buy F-35s. So it's not as if the F-35s have not been on the US radar in terms of sales to India. If you remember, they had said that they had objected to India acquiring S-400 because this will make the F-35 technology vulnerable, and the Russians will find some ways of stealing the signaling or whatever else that the the secrets of the F-35. And then there is the cost of F-35. Then there is the huge maintenance costs and the technical glitches that F-35 faces. Uh, uh, so if you ask me personally, I don't think we should at all go in for F-35. It'll we don't have the money for it, quite apart from anything else. Uh, but to what extent US will continue to press for it, because uh, Trump in his joint press conference said that we are opening the path for being able to sell F-35s to India. I hope some of our guys, I don't think so. I don't think our Air Force is terribly interested. But we may satisfy the United States uh, in other ways. They've talked about underwater sea equipment. That is, we want that. And the technology is very important, so we can satisfy them on that. Insofar as nuclear cooperation is concerned, uh, yes, we've said we're going to revise our Atomic Energy Act and our Civil Liability Act. This will take time. And then the nuclear projects are long gestation projects. The discussions take a long time. And then you have to see the cost of electricity produced, whether it's economically viable. Then we have our own indigenous programs. We want to develop our own indigenous technology. We don't want to become dependent on outside countries in this. And in the case of US, there's a very big hurdle that their laws allow sale of nuclear reactors, but not transfer of technology. So do we want to be in a situation where we just buy things and we don't get any transfer of technology? This will be a big issue. In the joint statement, that's why there's a hedging clause, possible transfer of technology. Clearly, we asked for it, and the US side added possible to it, to make it clear that it is something which may or may not happen. And then I think we like to develop our own small modular reactors. We have the technology. It has to be. Uh, we're not able to produce the kind of power from the modular reactor that we have produced because we need maximum is 300, but at least reach 200. We've not been able to do that, as I understand. But after all, we have a very advanced nuclear sector, and we can work on it. So it's not going to be that easy. But and we've seen in the case of Jaitapur with France, it's been going on and on and on and on. And how long has even Kudankulam taken place? We agreed to buy 6 reactors, but At the moment, only two are functioning. So these are long, drawn out negotiating processes involved. But yes, let's keep the ball rolling.
Last question, Ambassador. One of the things that took a lot of people by surprise because they were expecting something entirely different when the new Trump administration came in was this entire controversy on H-1B visas. And many people now argue there seems to be, even within the MAGA movement, some sort of resentment towards the success that the Indian community has seen in the US. How do you see this? How do you read this?
On this H-1B visas, there is
And
a kind.
also the status of the Indian community. Erstwhile, till recently, it was always lauded as the best performing minority, the ideal minority, absolutely assimilated, highly educated, the wealthiest community. But now things seems to have got a bit cloudy.
Yes, I think the MAGA base, which has a lot of racist elements in it, has begun to target Hindus. Uh, some say it's because of Vivek Ramaswamy's lecture about how American parents are involved in frivolous upbringing of their children rather than putting them into the STEM stream and this and that and build up those kind of capacities in the country. That doesn't seem to have gone down well. The other with the MAGA base is that they see all these Indian faces who are heading the Silicon Valley high-tech companies. And these companies have come under a cloud because they have been working against the Trump against Trump himself. Uh, so that kind of negative feeling about these California-based companies has, in a sense, uh, involves also those who are heading these companies. Yeah. Third, I won't put it past that there are foreign elements within the U.S. establishment, whether it's China or the Pakistan ISI, but to a limited extent, or or Muslim elements or Islamic elements in the United States. After all, Iran Omar, after all, she represents a certain kind of communal thinking in the anti-Hindu feeling and the anti-Indian feeling in the United States. Those lobbies may also be involved, especially as everybody says that China has made deep inroads into the U.S. media and Hollywood and this and that. So there are some who say that one should not treat this more that seriously, in the sense that these are isolated, sporadic things, and to think that if there's something on the social media to this effect that this represents wide thinking in the United States, that would be an error. There are people who say that too, but then the social media has such an impact because on people who rely on social media for the information, that uh, they may get the impression that this is a very widespread phenomenon. That's one aspect. The other is Trump himself is divided in his mind on this issue. On the one hand, he says that we need highly talented people to come into the country. He recognizes that. On the other hand, he wants to save US jobs. And he said it actually publicly that I am on both sides of the equation. Now, Musk is very much in favor of talent coming, but Musk has said there should be a reform of the system. Now, 70% of these H-1B visas goes to the Indians, techies. And there is a view that a lot of innovation that is taking place in the United States is on account of the Indians and foreigners who are involved in this. And that America will lose a lot and will lose its edge if it tried to stem the flow of these legal, skilled technicians, not skilled, but highly qualified technicians into the country. Then there is this larger issue of people who are there, about 750,000 of them who are undocumented, who don't have actually documents to entitle them to continue to reside in the United States. Different from these illegal immigrants who have been arrested on the border, who either waiting for green cards or they have some exceptions because of their asylum seekers or whatever they are. There is that issue also. So since the whole immigration issue is acutely sensitive and Trump is totally invested in it, so there would be some pressure. On the other hand, I have been reading, and I'm sure you have been also reading, that our companies who earlier, the big companies, Infosys and others, Tata Consultancy, they're relying less and less on H-1B fellows. And in fact, they are employing local talent more and more. So there is a change in the manner in which they are running their business, and therefore it's not that critical anymore for at least the very big companies. So it's a kind of a gray area for the moment, but I would conclude by saying that we may have a good case to retain the flow of highly qualified people who go there under the H-1B visa scheme, but there will be generally a tightening of visas and opportunities for Indian talent to go to the United States, which to my mind is a good thing. I mean, what is our responsibility to build up United States as a technological power remains ahead of China? Well, we must build up our own technological base, retain this talent, reform our system, give them incentive to stay in the country. And this kind of argument that I see that you know it will do great damage to the U.S. Technology progress and this and that because they are dependent on Indian talent. I mean, why do we give this argument, frankly?
On that note, Ambassador Sibal, thanks very much indeed. A very optimistic and nationalistic note to conclude this conversation. We will come back very soon to do two more sessions on America with you, one on its society and one on its economy, very, very soon. But thanks very much for walking us through today on the politics of America as you see it in the second Donald Trump administration as that administration begins its work. Thanks very much for your time.
My pleasure. My pleasure.